Welcome back to the Thinc Conversation. Still with me is JP Landman, political and trend analyst at JP Landman and Associates. If you have just joined us, we are still discussing the fundamental structures and strategic imperatives of leadership, examining how failure to implement planned decisions haunts the future of nations. JP, if I had an opportunity sometime to listen to you speaking. I think it was at a seminar where you spoke about the state of the nation in a global context. Where do you think we are positioned as South Africa in a global context?
I think we are well positioned because we are accepted as largely as non-aligned. We're a democracy, we're not an autocracy. So you cannot group us with Russia or China or other autocratic nations. We are like Brazil and India, a full functioning democracy. That's quite clear. We have a largely free market economy, not completely, but largely. And again, that puts us in the category of countries like Mexico and Brazil. So I think we're well positioned. In that sense, we're part of the Western tradition of democracy, human rights, and so on. On the other hand, the East is becoming much, much more important, particularly China. The National Development Plan, way back in 2012, already said that power will shift from the West to the East. So you have to deal with the East as well. You cannot turn your back on them, as some people would like us to do. So we are between them and we're connected to both. We're between them and connected to both. And I think we should just carry on with that road. We must maintain the relations of the old world, but we must also form relations with the new world. That's where I think we sit. Not everybody appreciates that, but I think that's a good position for South Africa to be in. We can sell our products all over the world, and we can have friendships all over the world. We must just maintain that position of non-alignment.
JP, you have serious interactions with government officials, private sector, and you're consulting one of the big banks, I might not say here. But do you find that in this country we have a roadmap? And if we have a roadmap, what are the key elements of that roadmap? Meaning that whether who is government or who is not government, the N1 is still the N1. Whether it's ANC, DA, there's a map, there's a road that we all must travel. Do you think we have something like that as a country?
Lucky to be honest, no, I don't think so. We had it with the National Development Plan in 2012. That was the opportunity, that was the moment. I think we've lost that moment, and the National Development Plan now is not nearly being pursued by everybody. So no. Is a new roadmap being developed? It looks like it if we look at how business and labor and government are coming together on issues like corruption, on issues like structural reform in ports and railways. We've seen it in energy and so on. So yes, there is a new roadmap being developed almost by default. And that's why I think the national conversation or the national Indaba that we will have later this year is so important, and we have to agree the important things that we want to work on, and we have to agree the important things that we have to deal with. You've mentioned one of them, and that is coming to terms with our past. Without that, we won't be able to go forward. On the other hand, I just want to say that in many ways, South Africa, the way we've approached things in the last 30 years or so, 30, 40 years, South Africa in many ways is almost a country that moves by default. We almost stumble to success or stumble to progress. We don't sit down like the Chinese or the Germans or maybe the the Scandinavians and do a plan and then work according to it. We're more based on play the ball as it comes and try and move forward.
The last minute syndrome at the Rugby World Cup.
Absolutely.
Just at the last minute when people thought we are not going to make it, and then we just go in, and then we become world champions.
Yeah.
Tell me, JP, what do you prescribe as our possible solution, if you were to be asked to prescribe as our possible solution to a 2% growth rate, given that we have had a 1.3 average growth rate since 2014. Between now and 2014, we were at 1.3. What would you prescribe?
Look, that's a very good point. The first prescription must be that 1.3% growth that you quoted is below our population growth. Now, for 12 years now, including 2025, for 12 years, our population grew faster than our economy. Now, Lucky, you cannot bring down unemployment. You cannot employ more people. You cannot roll back poverty if your population grows faster than the economy. It's got to be the other way around. The economy must grow faster. Even during apartheid, with all its own problems and negative characteristics, the economy grew faster than the population, and that made at least some progress possible for most people. So that's prerequisite number one. Now, at the moment, as you say, we're going at 1.3, 1.4. Can we go higher? Yes, we can. The Bureau for Economic Research at Stellenbosch has done the research. If we implement the government's program of Operation Vulindlela, what is Vulindlela? It's reform in energy, it's reform in railways, it's reform in ports, visas, water, and local government. If we can implement that, there's no reason why South Africa cannot grow at 3.5 or 4%. Now, 3.5 or 4% is it's twice and 3 times what our population growth is. If we can get to a position where we grow the economy at twice the speed of population growth, or 3 times the speed of population growth, you won't recognize this country in 5 years. You really won't. And that's the lesson we can take from countries like Korea, Taiwan, and China. China, and all the other countries I mentioned, grew their economies much faster than the population, and that brought the change. So you need to grow it faster. That's number one. Number two, pursue the structural reform under Operation Vulindlela. We mustn't stop, we mustn't dilute it, we mustn't step back. We've got to do more. And thirdly, we have to do something about the basics of delivery. That's why local government being part of Operation Vulindlela is so important. We have the crisis in our country, the governance crisis in our country is the worst at the local government level. That's really where things are falling apart. Not just here in Johannesburg, but all over the country. And if you go into rural areas, you see it even more dramatically. That has to be turned around.
JP, just maybe our last question, because we have to wrap up. It's who is responsible for ensuring that productivity meets the growth rates targets in the country? Who should be responsible? And I want you to talk to me about let's leave government a little bit and say your C-suits, your people that are running companies, what should be their role to support what government is doing? Because sometimes we always expect too much from government, and in other countries we see that the private sector actually drives growth.
Look, there's no question the private sector drives growth, absolutely no question. But they do it normally on the back of an enabling environment by government. You know, if you don't have electricity, if there's load shedding, well, then your factory can't operate, your shop can't operate. If you can't run your trucks on a road and take your products to the marketplace, which happens to many farmers in rural areas, then you can't progress. So the private sector drives growth, but they do it on the back of a government infrastructure, and that's why both are important. Government is important and the private sector. But on your question of who's responsible for productivity, it's essentially a management issue. Management must make sure that the workers are properly trained for their work, that they have the proper skills. They must make sure there's proper machinery and technology. Productivity is not the responsibility of workers or management. It is the responsibility of management. And there are marvelous examples in this country and elsewhere of where management and labor, management and unions sat down together and created better productivity. There are many examples like that.
JP, by management you mean school principals, hospital superintendents, anybody that has a management role in South Africa, private, public sector, state-owned entities. And that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Thinc Conversation. My sincere thanks to JP Landman for sharing his insights and for contributing to what we hope will be a much broader and ongoing national dialogue. We'd be happy to hear your perspective on this topic. Thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm Lucky Matebola.